welcome to the Enchanted Farm. It's been 8 years since you last visited us.
Well, it's great to be here, Luis. Thank you very much for having me uh, and inviting me to chat about the issues that are pertinent both for the work that you do and the work that I do. And I'm looking forward to finding ways to find connections
Mhm.
in that regard. I was here quite a long time ago, uh, but I had a kind of a visit and especially a dialogue with Tony Moloto that has resonated over the years and kept me interested in the issue, particularly of how an architect can can help uh, through the use of his or her skills in the realm of the social enterprise.
True, because the physical has a lot to do with how we organize the social. In
Absolutely.
fact, I pride myself, I call myself as a social architect.
Yeah.
Because you need to make sure that the the houses, the pocket gardens interact with the community because it really contributes to, I guess, not just the functionalities but also to the pride of the community.
Um, it's early in the conversation, but you know, you already got right to the heart of I think what makes architecture important to me uh, as something that is beyond the inherent value of bricks and mortar, and that architecture is literally the vessel within which we live our lives,
Mhm, mhm.
um, and that it's not neutral. That architecture has meaning, and the meaning is derived from the relationship that we understand is developed between members of the communities. And then our purpose, our work is to not only represent that physically, but also through the creative process that we understand to help curate and evolve and make more efficient and make more beautiful that kind of social experience.
Yeah, what I noticed, you see, in GK we build small houses,
Yes.
so we needed to make sure that the interaction between the relationships between neighbors,
Yeah.
between children,
Yeah.
are happening
Exactly.
despite the confined spaces that the houses that we are building are limited,
Mm.
limiting the families. But the interaction builds the relationship strengthens the community,
Yeah.
and that to me is a key infrastructure
Yeah.
in terms of building houses or converting spaces into dwellings.
One of the interesting things about design, particularly design that is related to the physical environment within which we play out our lives, is that there are fundamental principles that are the same whether they're of a small interior space or of a large community. Um, and for me, maybe the model is maybe more interior design than architecture,
Mm-hmm,
in that we live our lives through along a kind of a highway. We enter a space, and then at each juncture within the space, we'll have a decision: do we turn right? Do we turn left? Do we go to the private space? Do we go to the public space? Do we go vertically up or down? Um, and then how do we exit and re-enter the larger community? So it's almost like a zooming
mm-hmm.
effect that we become, familiar with as a metaphor through our work, drawing now on computers. We can zoom up, we can zoom down and get closer, farther away. So I think what you're describing is that the entire community, that's the locus of design. You had, I think you told me 35, 36, 37 hectares.
Yes.
And so I look at your entire 37 hectares as the home of GK. And we enter at a gate, and there are certain decision points, and some bring you to the agricultural district, some bring you to the residential district. But the principles that we as designers deploy are the same when we're thinking about how to evolve 37 hectares or how to evolve a 37 square meter
True.
house.
Especially the houses are only like 30 square meters to 40 square meters, and they interact with the whole
That's exactly
with the whole
right.
area.
That's exactly right.
And I guess for the other GK communities, Toby, the being community is important, especially for the Philippines, because we are very often visited by typhoons,
Yes.
and they usually are able to respond very well if they respond cohesively,
Yes.
is they work together, and that cannot happen without that sense of community. So the architecture outside of the house is really the social lines
Yeah.
relationship
Yes.
that builds resiliency and cohesiveness, so the community can respond together, and I think that's what we're trying to build in the GK, both especially in the rural areas. Yeah.
You know, I recently left the Philippines after living here for about 11 years.
That long, huh?
Oh, yeah. And I'm still deeply connected here as and do quite a bit of work in the Philippines and surrounding regions. And of course, I'm married to a Filipina, and my my family is deeply integrated into your culture. But it took me a little while to understand, and a little while longer to appreciate that communalistic nature, that culture of affinities that has evolved here in the Philippines, and how maybe at the expense, maybe a little bit, from my perspective, suppression maybe of the individual, the elevation of the communal, how that develops exactly what you described, a resilience that allows a community to respond, to crises that face a community or individuals within the community. And to me, that is maybe one of the most interesting, as a Westerner, as interesting qualities and characteristics to try to amalgamate into the design. So, of course, it's the same maybe throughout the world, but maybe in different ratios. The individual and the collective always work hand in hand. So the interests of the individual and the interests of the collective, however it's defined, if it's the family, if it's the village, if it's the state, have to be represented in the design, both metaphorically but also tangibly. So this is really a beautiful workshop for the evolution of those kind of ideas, because they have immediate impact on the ground
Yes,
to the
yes.
welfare of your community.
And so we can see how communities can respond to crises.
Yeah.
But you asked me earlier, where are we heading?
Yes.
So we're also trying to see now if we can organize the community into production.
Yeah.
If they can plant together, be more, they plant together, harvest together, and create wealth together. So we're trying to plug that from resiliency now to production, from resiliency now to wealth creation, if we can into that platform of community. So
And it
that's
sounds
where
to me
we're
as-
heading.
Sounds to me as if the key there would be kind of an agreement on the mission by the larger group. I'm curious how you kind of evolve that collective spirit so that people are not at odds with the mission.
Well, it's almost brought about by survival, I guess, because people are going hungry. So
Necessity is
necessity is the
mother of
driver
social
here.
invention.
Exactly. So they have land,
Yeah.
but they know how to plant, but they don't know how to make business.
Yeah.
They really are good agriculturists, the farmers, but they don't know how to do cash flow or to make sure that quality is there. So
Sounds to me like they should have all become architects, because we know how to design, but we don't know about business.
that's why this culture, this exchange of
Yes.
discipline
Yes.
can really help
That's
the
right.
farmers as well. No? That there's more system and not just season.
Yeah.
because the farmers are really confined by the season, long or short, depending on the crop. And when they plant, they just, okay, let's harvest after 3 months, after this, come what may.
I would
So
imagine
there has
kind of
got
the
to be.
social horizon is also important. The farmer's kind of tied to the ground, and like his horizon is literally limited by
The
the
crop.
need to tend to the
Exactly.
ground, tend to the crop, and then I guess the leadership is meant to look a little bit beyond and see where the
Like
market might be.
you architects, you tend to future proof your design.
That's right.
But farmers, they just plant now, and 3 months
Yeah.
after I'll harvest.
Yes, exactly.
If my crop is sugar, then I plant now, 10 months after I harvest.
Yeah.
After that, I'll deal with it.
Yes.
But you guys, you design for like
The
future
ages.
proofing, and
That's
you
correct.
maybe because my observation there, Toby, is when you are, especially the poor,
Mhm.
and you are at that survival mode, when you worry about your next meal,
Yes.
the future oriented value is basically absent. You know, the value of planning for the future is practically not there.
Yeah.
So I guess that's when you ask me that's the hurdle.
Sure.
Breaking them away from a seasonal frame of mind to a more, long term view of
That-
several
yeah.
seasons.
That's a very poignant observation, and you're absolutely right. I mean, of course, in culture, we have to always have that balance. Somebody has to plant the crop and worry about tomorrow, and somebody has to think about the long term. And it would seem to me that maybe the structure that ties those two together is education, not necessarily only formal education,
True.
but also kind of the implementation, the importation of additional skills and broader points of view from both sides. With respect to the analogy of architecture as being, a design skill that looks forward to the future, as opposed to maybe on the other end of the scale being agriculture. Within our own design communities, the opposite ends of the spectrum that I perceive would be architecture, which, as you indicated, is future oriented. We have to build things that last a good long time because of the massive investment required. So multiple generations. But we also have what I would say are a kind of equivalent to the short-term production, which would be in fashion design, where things happen very quickly, design happens quickly, and it responds to the season in a slightly different meaning. And so by learning from each other, architecture can become a little bit lighter and less ponderous and less serious, and fashion can become a little bit more imbued with meaning. And I see maybe the kind of same analogy with respect to the social development that you're doing, where you have to worry about today, you also have to worry about tomorrow, and the two have to inform each other. So I know that we work in very different fields, but for me, it's a great synopsis and reminder of the almost impossibly broad set of criteria that we have to bring together into a cohesive solution.
It's interesting that you mentioned about this quick short term
Yeah.
aspect of your spectrum, because for many of us we're here
Yeah.
because it really is, how should I say, even just for example the beauty,
Yes.
the beautification, it's quite difficult to bring beauty to a community that is surviving on
Yeah.
its next meal. It's quite difficult to introduce the value of education to a mother
Yeah.
of three when she has to contend with, oh, how can I feed these three boys of mine tomorrow?
Yes. Of course.
Or at some point, these two will have to stop schooling.
Yeah.
So it's really what we call the poverty of capacity.
Yeah.
Education,
Yeah.
and not just university,
Yeah.
but really knowledge.
Yes.
And,
life
and
skills.
this is a hurdle. This is the headwind that the poor is facing, and coupled with that is really the hunger.
Yeah.
This empowers them,
Yeah.
and that sense of community, somehow they find that sense of, oh, we're not forgotten, we're not being left behind, that kind of relationship,
Yeah.
and connecting them now to the long term. And that's I see, I see that happening in many of our communities, like, oh, don't throw your garbage around. But if they are living beside a garbage dump, I mean, what can you do, no?
Sure.
Don't throw your plastic, your non-degradable. But their job is really to scavenge.
Yes.
So there's that,
And looking for value.
exactly. So that's the hurdle of community building for GK.
And to me, also, that's it's a very poignant observation. Um, how how can you plan for tomorrow when today is so difficult?
Yeah.
And the observation that you made earlier about my field really being about the future. I mean, we are inherently planners. You could just change the name of architecture to planning, future planning. Although that's been taken by another profession, so we'll have to stick with architecture.
Okay.
But the idea of not just transplanting skills, but points of view, and opportunity and breathing space, it's a mighty challenge. And we architects quite often enter the field with a very enthusiastic sense of social mission. In fact, I think if you speak to the majority of young architects, they really entered the field for that reason, thinking that they can make a positive contribution to society and to help ameliorate some of the problems they see, such as say, housing poverty. And it turns out that the reasons for those kind of structural problems are possibly beyond the scope of an individual architect to solve. But to be in a place like this and see tangible steps being taken, I have to say, is very, very inspiring, even to an old architect like me, who's been searching throughout his career for ways to make those kinds of contributions. So the distance between talking the talk and walking the walk is often, quite a substantial one, and sometimes it takes almost a lifetime
True.
of journeying and experimentation before you come across models, that can help, close that gap.
Talk about a lifetime. I'm turning 53 on Monday.
Hala.
Patay. I've been doing this the past more than 25, 27 years.
Yeah.
This whole social work, this whole mission oriented lifestyle, and how, and one of those conversations I had was, someone asked me, do you ever get tired of doing this? I always draw my strength from that conversation I had with one of the mothers we call nanays. I asked her, so what's the greatest thing that GK has done for you? So she had thank you for the house.
Yeah.
But the volunteers left, they did not finish painting the back side of the house. Maybe
Right.
after the selfie,
Right.
they all left.
Right.
The toilet was a bit, off center. So
Right.
when she had to occupy the seat, she had to write for a second and then sit at her throne. So there was something, and I said, oh, so I started to list all the complaints, and at the end she told me, but the greatest thing that GK has done is that you never gave up in trying to find ways on how to make life better for us. And I think that is what GK is all about, Toby. You've seen our houses evolve from coco lumber to to high density fiberboard to, it is evolving, and you've noticed some of the designs, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I think the spirit that is driving GK is really beyond the structures, and really going towards the heart of the issue, and that is really homelessness, and that is really poverty. And there there is no easy solution. Issues interlock, so therefore we have to be not just focus, but focus on many things to focus.
Yeah.
And that gives me the inspiration, the encouragement, that conversation I had with that nanay, that you never gave up on us, and I think that is what is driving the growth, I guess, of GK, the desire to grow, and to really create an impact on these families.
Well, it's poignant to hear. If I may interpret what you're saying,
Go.
you're suggesting that it's a love of your fellow man that is keeping you engaged, keeping your spirits high, and making you feel as if the mission is worth the sacrifice.
It is.
And I can relate a little bit in the sense that my own career has been one of two parallel tracks. One was as an architect, it's a professional career, and the other one was as a teacher.
Teacher.
From the more or less the day that I received my architecture license in 1991, I also became a professor of design, and I've been teaching in parallel. I joke that in the morning I lose money as a teacher, and I make up for it in the afternoon. But much of what you said resonated with me. I'm going to be 70 years old
No.
in a couple of months. Thank you. And so
Seriously?
I'm ahead of you a little bit, and I am as or more enthusiastic about what I do today than I've ever been. Every day I wake up with a greater sense of what's possible and a greater sense of mission. And I wondered, why is that? Because at my age, most folks are retired or looking forward to retiring, or have put aside the focus of their labors. And for me, on the architectural side, it's the excitement of creativity, of imagining and manifesting something that doesn't exist yet and willing it into being. But even more so, it's working with young people who envision a blurry future and embracing them and helping them move forward. And what I realized, that it's actually an antidote to pessimism. Like, you cannot be a pessimist if you are a teacher. And I'm assuming the same thing is true. You cannot be a pessimist if your life's work is embracing others and being a teacher in a way as well. So I derive enormous benefits, psychic benefits, from both of those endeavors, and I believe you and I maybe share that spirit.
Maybe we found the fountain of youth, Toby.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. To me, it's like being the father of thousands, because I have that same sense of desire for their success and their empowerment as I do for my own 4 children.
So I always see beauty when I visit communities, and I can see the lines that are crooked.
Yeah.
Because I'm an engineer.
Yeah.
But I can see the deficiencies. But when I see the people happy, when I see the kids are interacting, the mothers are dreaming for a better life future, and the young, for example, these products are really innovations from the community. These are their formulations. These are
And evolving out of their existing skills and
Exactly.
knowledge of the land and knowledge of the products that could be brought forth.
yes. For example, these chips. This is sweet potato chips. No, the mothers are the one grating it and cooking it, and the cook is one of the young ladies here, girly. You can
I
open it
don't
if you
want
like.
to insult your host
Go open it.
skills, but I believe it's time to.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, go for it.
It is
Go
time.
for it.
It's merienda time.
I'll open everything.
Just this one will be fine.
So I pity the production crew that they're just watching us.
Enjoying a
This
snack.
one is mushroom.
Huh?
Mushroom crackling.
Mushroom chicharron.
This is not chicharron. We have our mushroom chicharron. This is like crop peck,
Oh yeah, like the shrimp.
the shrimp, but this is mushroom. So we grow our own mushroom and then we cook our own
super setup.
crackling here. Super sarap.
Yeah.
Right? So that came from probably eating rice for 11 years here.
Yeah.
Huh? How give me a few Filipino words that you've learned so far. From your wife?
Well, she tells me not to be so soon yet. Because it's not terribly attractive. You know, I having lived here for such a long time, I did occasionally buy some programs that teach me Filipino words, and admittedly, I'm a bit lazy. So the fact that my Filipino grammar is very weak is my fault entirely. But I have to blame a little bit on the hospitality of Filipinos, because when I would speak to them in Tagalog,
They would
after
speak in English.
laughing hysterically, so they would compose themselves and speak with me in English. My kids today, continuously make fun of my accents.
Okay.
But yeah,
What brought you to the Philippines in the first place before meeting your wife?
well, before
I'm curious, yeah.
No, it wasn't. I met my wife in New York.
Oh, okay. So she brought you here.
She brought me here.
Okay.
She was on vacation in New York. We happened to be looking at the same painting at the same time in the Museum of Modern Art in Manhattan. And one thing led to another, and that was 23 years ago, and we ended up getting married, and we started coming here for Christmas, and I enjoyed it so much, and eventually we opened up a firm here, partnership with my firm in New York. And then one thing led to another, and eventually we moved here and stayed here for more than a decade.
And your kids were born here, or
My kids were born in New York,
Okay.
and then when they were 3 or 4 months old, we came to the Philippines just for a little R&R to get used to being parents, and then decided to stay. It wasn't really planned. Initially 3 months, then 6 months, and then let's worry about it another day.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
We were chatting about it in the car up here, about why I actually was glad to stay. It really had to do, I think, with the very helpful experience for a creative person of changing their environment. And I mean environment in the broadest sense, cultural, physical, climactic, and that suddenly your senses are awakened, and that kind of neutral gaze that just allowed you to look at things, and woke up, elevated to the next level, and suddenly you were seeing things, and seeing things forced you to interpret the world around you in a new way. And for a creative person, that's really maybe the greatest gift you can give to yourself. And some people do it maybe internally, other people do it externally. And my own work as a creative person evolved tremendously here. So it was really a great experience for me to be here. And of course, for family and social reasons, cultural reasons as well. But, it was a very dynamic moment in my own life as an evolving person who tries to be creative every day.
In the GK, the young, they're very creative and innovative. They would, well, I would look at the communities as like a artwork,
Yeah, very much.
because the volunteers, they work hard. The labor of love. And I always look at the communities as this piece of art, this piece of painting that were made by hundreds of volunteers with some partners and then with some families.
And
And in fact, it's priceless. It's really
absolutely.
priceless. I'll tell you a quick story, Toby. That we have a community down south, and they sit on a very prime property. I guess when the owner gave it to GK, he wasn't thinking of the future. So right now the whole thing has value weighted, and you have the GK there in the middle. And he wanted to like, can I just buy it? And to my surprise, he was offering more than the value of the house and the
Right.
property. But the families, they wouldn't sell
They had
because
different sense of value.
they have a different sense of value because they honored the sacrifices of the volunteers. They were telling us, we will not sell this because we would be dishonoring those hundreds of volunteers who work hard to help us build
Yeah.
the houses. So you see, when you put value, economic and whatever value to a structure, it's not just the location, it's not just the design, but I think how people in the area values it.
Yeah.
And that I saw even here,
Yeah.
they would not change this for anything.
Well, there is a special kind of ownership that I've seen evolves to the fruit of your own labors and that of your community. In architecture, we have kind of a whole subfield of historic preservation, adaptive reuse, and in a way that it's not particularly creative because you're dealing with the idea of paying homage to something that came before you, to the work that other people created before you. So that's why we might want to preserve a building that may be beautiful. We want to preserve it for that reason, or maybe because that's where Jose Rizal lived and it has significant meaning. But the idea of cherishing something that you built, in my sense, is a kind of acknowledgement of the value of creative work. As an architect, I always talk to people and they say, "Oh, I would really have loved to have been an architect, but I'm just not creative." And I have to reject that immediately because you literally cannot live, you cannot survive without being creative. So my sense is that all people, maybe all living creatures, are creative in the sense that we respond to the environment moment by moment in ways that we couldn't have anticipated. Even a conversation. We're sitting down, we've been chatting for 45 minutes, and we have no idea what we're going to say. So we are creating these monuments of words and thoughts and feelings and emotions, and everyone does that. So, to my sense, we are all creative, and the only difference maybe between the work that some people do and other people perform is how we define it. So the idea of building a community and being a part of that, either as a resident or as a manager or as a volunteer, it's a kind of recognition, either overtly or covertly, that you're participating in an important creative act.
When I was first invited to have a chat with you, and obviously I googled you. I didn't know you were able to visit us earlier.
Yeah.
So I said, where will the convergence of this conversation be? I saw your design, I saw your work, and GK. So I said, where is that intersect? And I guess we both are drawn to this aspiration for every family to have a home that can call their own. I think that was a powerful convergence
Very much so.
between your market
Yeah.
and the market of GK, if you could call it a market.
Yeah.
Both they really want to have a sense of permanency, a structure that can protect them from the elements, but also a structure that they can call their own, their
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
and can be a source of pride for the children.
Yeah.
And then I think, that understanding about community.
Yes.
So I said, okay, this is gonna be a very interesting conversation with Toby.
How are we doing so far
Oh yeah,
with respect to convergence?
I think we need to extend 2 more days.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, because you said a lot of things that I want to follow through off camera.
Okay. But yeah, I guess you can necessarily subdivide the market. You know, I obviously work for generally for people with the means to hire me and my team and to purchase the land and to build whatever it is they're going to be building. But the impetus rather, and the motivation and the skill sets, that we have evolved, are universally applicable. And as I alluded to earlier, people in my profession are desperate for opportunities to contribute to this market as well. And it's also my sense that the people with whom I've had the privilege to work as patrons and clients are also deeply invested, generally speaking, in the broader social welfare. And I've had many interesting conversations with my clients about how those skills that we deploy in order to curate a wonderful environment for them, whether they can also be deployed at different scales and different economies and different cultures for that matter. One of the interesting things, if I may ramble on just a little bit, is that architecture is a very ancient profession, and in some respects, if we went back a couple of thousand years into an architect's office, say in Rome, there was a famous architect by the name of Marcus Vitruvius, and he wrote a book that's still read today. It's a kind of a primer on architecture. It's called the 10 Books of Architecture, which it's a little bit of an encyclopedia on how to design, how to build. And he came up with an interesting maxim that summarizes what we need to do. And in some respects, somewhat revolutionary. He said, for a design in architecture or any other design discipline to be successful, it has to achieve utility, firmness, and delight. So what he means by that is utility, it has to solve the problem. So a house has to be able to house the family or the community that it's designed for. Firmness has to be technically sound. So in an earthquake zone, it has to resist earthquake. In a flood zone, it has to resist floods. And delight, by which he meant beauty. So for me, it's the idea that beauty is a function, kind of a revolutionary idea. It's not optional. And that's something that I talk about with my students quite a bit, is encompassing the framework of the solutions that we try to achieve in our lives. And architecture kind of serves often as a kind of linguistic metaphor for the other work that we do, right? The architecture of computer language. You mentioned, the architecture of the work that you do. So it's a kind of an organizational structure, but it has specific objectives. But if any one of those is missing from the solution, we can't consider it, and we don't consider it to be successful. But what I was really getting at earlier was the idea that we've evolved over time, wherein architecture and the traditions of architecture, like cuisine, really grew out of the ground. And that traditional architecture is just one manifestation of local culture. So in one region, you'd build out of this material using these skills. In another region, you'd build out of these materials using those skills, just as you would cook something using an ingredient that grew naturally there and something else elsewhere. We have become kind of divorced a little bit and we become a kind of one of the early globalizers. And what we need, what a lot of architects are now doing is trying to find a way to come back to something that's meaningful, and eventually it brings it back to a place like this where they can connect to the ground and connect to the raw materials that grow here, and connect to the needs of a particular group, which are different in some respect to the needs of another group.
The the first two I can really relate, the function and
Utility and
the
firmness.
utility and firmness.
Yeah.
The delight or beauty, I think that is where we measure success in GK. Simply because, you know, if you observe the poor communities, they call slum community or informal sector,
Yeah.
it's really shades of gray and
Oh,
rust.
absolutely.
So there's really no beauty there. Poverty rubs the
Yeah.
family that, you
Sure,
know, the your um, I guess, I don't know if this is politically correct. They can edit this. Poverty dehumanizes.
Oh.
Because,
I think it, to the contrary, it's politically correct. It's a statement of truth.
okay, good. At least they will not cut that statement of mine because you also said that.
Absolutely.
So it dehumanizes. It
Absolutely.
robs the person of color, of beauty, of
Yeah.
art,
Yes.
because they will have to survive.
Yes.
They will have to make sure that
Yes.
they have something to feed their kids, and sometimes even go to petty crimes.
Yeah.
And so beauty is a key success measure for GK. When you see this, when you see them composing songs, when you see them paint. That's why we paint our houses to be
Yeah.
bright colors.
Yeah.
We ask them to really do some landscaping,
Sure.
because that is inching towards that sense of beauty, that sense of culture,
Yeah.
that they are graduated or broken away from that vicious cycle of survival. So yeah, beauty is I guess a key success factor for GK when you go to a community. That's why when we see that there's no landscaping, we no, you have to. People were asking, why do you have to spend money to
Yeah.
paint? No, because it's important. You know, it is very important that we build the houses that we ourselves can live in.
Right.
We don't build those houses if, you know, we ourselves cannot live in those houses. So equal in worth.
Yeah.
We will look at the poor equal in worth. You know, it's
Yes.
not about can they afford it. No, it's about, you know, if we want to live in that, they should be able to also enjoy what we are seeing and what we are experiencing. So we look at the poor equal in worth and dignity. And I guess that's a design parameter for GK. So,
it's a kind of, I would think any person or organization concerns themselves, you know, with maybe an attempt to live a life of moral dignity, would feel the same way. What we are consciously endeavoring in architecture is that those three ideas are so integrated, it comes out of a single solution. There's not something that about the design that promotes utility and something else that promotes the other two, but that it's a kind of a synthesis, gestalt, they like to say, so that, you know, one part can't be separated from the other part. So the entirety of the solution is reliant on all of those qualities and characteristics, and the richness of all of the cultures that evolved in the Philippines maybe is not fully evident at certain times and places because of the burden of poverty. But, you know, my guess is when those burdens are lifted, those traditions that each of your people, each of your tribes and nations evolved, you know, they, they, I'm guessing, will kind of inevitably resurface.
Yeah.
And 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 become evident and manifest. And so I'm also guessing that, so it's a kind of inherent also within the local culture here in
Because it breaks one mindset.
Yeah.
In Tagalog, so you have the first two. If only the first two you incorporate, and then we say pwede na yan. Pwede na yan. But pwede na yan is not good enough.
Sure.
If you really want to, create a social impact that will last, hindi, as I say in Tagalog, hindi pwede na yan.
Of course,
It just cannot be. You cannot be mediocre.
The same thing is true for other strata of society. I mean, if we drive through Manila, we'll see plenty of examples of
Unfinished.
maybe commercially successful buildings that are missing that component, that cultural enrichment of delight, contributory to the broader Philippine culture. Sometimes it's utility, firmness, and monetary reward at the expense of something else. But so the conversations that happen here that are focused inwardly hopefully can resonate back out and remind maybe more privileged members of society that they also have a responsibility to evolve culture through contributions of beauty that people that with the kinds of skills that we have can help contribute.
I hope that this will not be your last visit.
Oh, no.
And I hope this will be a continuing conversation between
I hope so.
not all people, but
Thank
persons
you.
who dream and work hard for that, and really, I really look forward to more conversations with you, especially the one that you mentioned earlier about growing a house.
Yeah,
I do hope we can continue, and you're most welcome with your kids, with your, I don't know if they're kids at this time, maybe in your wife. You're most welcome to
I appreciate it.
stay here and enjoy the
Appreciate
farm.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you very
for
much for
this.
inviting me. It was a wonderful conversation. I look forward to visiting again.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you very much.